population.
Right.
The best thing for me to do is to go work for the government.
And disseminate it from a place of safety.
Exactly, yeah.
That's how I felt like when the first thing that came to mind when we were talking about it was like for like the universities, because you would think that, you know, like if we think of Alexandria as like the first like real university that pops into my mind, I'm like, okay, well, everyone who taught there were just like the head people were philosophers, you know. But now you think about that now, and it's like, who are the head people at a university?
Yeah.
So
essentially business majors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's because, and in my head, it's like what supplanted the truth was profit. So as long as the other idea for universal basic income, I think that is like a really cool idea that infuses into like just like people's worldview, is that we should focus on maybe like materialistic resources and like the organization of materialistic resources as something that is kind of like a minimum that just needs to happen, and then the meritocratic kind of ideas can be in a way of like more artistic things, more like creative things. So if we go to the news thing, it's like if you get a certain amount of money, everyone gets a certain amount of, or I guess every news outlet gets like a certain amount of money, then literally what is you worry, okay, well, what's the point in writing good news? And it's because people will listen to you more. You might not get paid, but like, do we?
Well, and now
really
you're benefiting society by forming the pockets.
But do you see how that has nothing to do with profit?
No.
I
mean, the real role
issue though of whether or not people will watch it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. If it's not just like, you know, catchy entertainment bullshit.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully, you've engendered the kind of culture at that point.
I feel like you go back to the school system.
Yeah. It's all the school system always has to come part of this. This is just like I just kind of threw that out there because there's a fun thought exercise to think about where you could apply the democratic model to different businesses that I think would improve them. One, Drew, is imagine publicly funded universities democratically run by their professors. Or if you want to get even more radical, with some participation even by the students. Mm-hmm. Like, what would that look like in terms of, you know, that kind of vibrant, organic, educational, you know, institution? I mean, it's fascinating to think about the possibilities.
I think that does get into, I think that's actually a really good place of like getting into why it's important to have the meritocracy, though.
I agree, but I also think you should. I don't believe that meritocracy and democracy are not compatible.
Fair.
Because when I look at ancient Athens, they appoint people to positions of power and follow those people's lead, and a lot of times it's the best and brightest. A lot of times it's people who have come out from the citizenry, you know, to show their quality, and they convince the people. This has a dark side too, because demagogues and tyrants are also very good at convincing the people, especially during times of stress or war or crisis. So there's that problem as well. But at least when you contain it to businesses, if they kind of like go crazy and collapse, it's contained, you know, at least more than if you did it with a government.
I think it goes like actually a really good example of it is like a funny one that just came to mind, but in Game of Thrones with Blackfish. You know, Blackfish does his best to like, he's like, no, I'm not going to let you in. I'm not going to let the Lannisters in. You can take this fucking castle if you want to. And then you have the dude who was like, okay,
Spoiler alert, by the way.
Oh, yeah, sorry. But yeah, you have the nephew that goes in and is like, I'm going to, you know, usurp you. Using the same power, which would be like, like, for me in my head, would be the democratic power if you have someone.
See, but I would argue, though, that that's neither democratic nor meritocratic. Like, Blackfish would be meritocratic in that he had the best ideas, he was the best qualified, he was the real soldier, right?
Yeah.
And Edmund?
I think something like that.
Yeah.
He obviously was lesser on the meritocratic scale, but you're within a feudalistic system. Mm-hmm. So the soldiers are just simply acting in response to the hierarchy.
Right.
Oh, he's the Lord. I have to listen to him, even though you have the better idea. Mm-hmm. That's not democracy. That's not a democratic thing. He's going, no, but he's our Lord. That's what the guy says.
It's true.
He's our Lord.
Oh, yeah, that captain did say
so it's an appeal to hierarchy, not to democracy. Yeah, it's not like the people got together. Who do you think we should listen to? Let's vote. Let's debate. Like,
no. Well,
also, that is an interesting idea, though. Like, what if they had gotten together and debated it? Like, is that really the better idea?
I don't know.
To let the Lannisters in or not? Because, I mean, I don't remember the exact.
I would have rather seen that than simply.
Right. I mean, certainly.
The only thing that I wanted to like
I
point
mean, at least
out
it's on
there
them what they suffer.
was okay, but I also don't think that tension is completely devoid of democracy, because that's also like a definitely like mob rule kind of idea. Like I get that you're right now you're like focusing on the fact that there was a hierarchy that was in place, but that's like it's still an example of someone who did have power. Everyone was listening to him because he was the Blackfish, and he wasn't the Lord, but he was the Blackfish. And then at least there was some tension that came across with.
So they had to make a decision.
Exactly.
I would argue, though, it would only become democratic at the point where they exert their free will over that situation and discuss it and come up with their own collective consensus, because they didn't question it individually or as a group. They simply kind of had like a computational dispute. Oh, who is superior on this hierarchical program that I'm following?
Well, I think that's where the tension came up.
Also, just that one guy, and then he was essentially the real leader because he he had the authority over all of the men.
I get that there is the democracy.
If there was any democracy, it was like that much.
But,
you know.
But what I'm saying is, I don't want to get away from the idea that there isn't going to be that power structure within democracy. I think it's very natural for some people to be listened to a lot more than other people.
Definitely.
In that
I agree,
democracy.
but if it's not institutionally embedded, it's going to be a lot less
Which is why I was using it as an example, not to be like literal, but like as a good example of what might occur when it happens.
And I think the more you democratically empower people, you know, the less they're prone to be influenced by that kind of appeal to authority, you know.
I don't necessarily want to say that. I would say that it's much about trying to like become better. Whatever that tension is, to like progress. That usually keeps people awake. Because if they get into a place of like everyone is like we're pretty great, it's like they're like let's try that idea. Let's try that idea. Why not that idea? You know, because they are so stable that they're like I can try anything. Really,
I feel like a lot of times it actually works the other way, where when you're really stable,
you don't try anything.
You're not trying anything because you're happy with what's going on.
No, that's
why when you're unstable in cycles of very.
Well, yeah,
you aren't trying anything. Like I wasn't saying that the people who were like, yeah, let's try that. That they're saying that because they're not coming up with anything. So someone else comes in and says, I have a great idea, guys. This can be like wonderful, but you've been stable for so long that you're not critical and you're not critically thinking anymore.
I agree. It could become less
you can
innovative.
Be like, oh yeah, that guy. Why not?
I actually think they'd be more likely to do that in a time of stress or crisis.
Certainly, if we look at history, that's what we see.
Yeah, looking at history, it's democracies or institutions that have democratic aspects to them always are more active in times of stress and least active in times of stability.
I mean, I think that it's stable. I think the one thing is that it's usually losing stability, right? Like the stress comes from losing stability. Yeah. So that's the place. So yeah,
systemic outside pressures, environmental pressures.
Yeah. So there could be a point at which you reach a certain level of stability where you just don't change anything, right? But that would also probably not be the best. Like, I don't know. Like, a lot of people would argue that
doesn't stay the same over time, right? Yeah. Like he's saying, the environment's going to change.
Exactly.
I think the people are... I think that a democratic culture is more likely to make sober decisions during a time that's stable. Maybe someone can still come in and say, hey, I have this idea, we should do this new thing, but people are going to be more skeptical if things are good right now.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
Whereas if shit's crazy, people... in tandem with said craziness, become more open to crazy shit.
True, but we're
it's
also...
like right now, Trump can only happen because there's a huge portion of the population that's in a state of stress or despair of some kind.
I just want to, I guess what I'm trying to get across is that when you're stable, it's more difficult. Like, you might have a good idea of what it is that had created that stability, but it's not always apparent. And so it's that same idea that you get when, and one thing would be, like, Plato's Cave is a great example of this, where they're so, stuck in the way that they're thinking, that this guy comes in and it's like, hey guys, we promised that, I went and checked out, there's, all this wonderful shit that you're not paying attention to, come and get out. And they're like, no, we don't believe you. So that's another, so I'm saying, there's...
And I'm saying... they're more likely to say, okay, let's leave the cave if there's like an earthquake happening or something like that. You know what I mean? Like if they're just cool, if they're good and there's meat on the fire and it's warm in the cave,
I'm just saying,
like, fuck off, Socrates.
But that's a clear way. That's a clear way forward. That's a clear way forward, right? I'm just saying that, like, yeah. So, I guess the thing was like, we lose our ability if we become stable. First, we become sensitized. That's one big thing that we were talking about, like, the other night. Like, and I think that's kind of like we're showing that now, where it's like we're so worried about how all of these like different like political ideas will change us that we're like trying really hard not to do anything. Sure, you get the extreme people who will vote for Trump and stuff like that, who want to like throw chaos, but that's not because they thought they were stable. They thought they were in a shit place, and a clear way forward would be to elect Trump.
Yeah.
Well,
especially,
I think that mentality or that phenomenon is what kind of precipitates these cycles of stability and then like crises.
Yeah.
Where people during times of stability or perceived stability are so resistant to change that they're unwilling to change with the environment. And so they maintain this idea that they have that they think is working until it literally stops working. As opposed to recognizing that it's not working as well as it used to and trying to make incremental changes. They're like, no, it worked for a while. Let's just keep it the way it is. Like, maybe it'll get back to where it was.
Right.
And then something crashes and they're like, fuck. Let's, what about you? Can you do it? And they just, like, grab the nearest crazy dude and they're like, let's put him in charge and see what'll happen.
That guy usually says,
them dice.
no, guys, I have the idea. I have the solution.
I was definitely, broad strokes there. Yeah.
I think in terms of, like, our current political landscape, it's particularly troubling because when you factor in the unresponsiveness of our political institutions because they've been captured by corporate power, people sense this. I mean, people understand the government's bought. And people understand the government's not working for them. And the worse that perception gets, combined with the worsening of people's material reality around them, they're going to get more and more radical. Because the system's not responding to them in like a slow way along with the rise of their stresses. It's not providing piecemeal reform to ease their suffering.
Exactly.
And so the pressure, you know, it's like you have something cooking on a pot and there's no air to get out. Yeah. And it's just, and so they're going to throw crazy shit at you eventually. I mean, I think of Trump as, you know, a certain sect of the population faced with that reality that we all share, you know, and they just turned to the Molotov cocktail that was near them, and they're just throwing it at a system that's not responding to them because they don't know what else the fuck to do.
I think that's
like whatever's happening right now isn't working for me, so.
I really like that analogy for Trump as a Molotov cocktail. I feel like that's very fitting given what he's been doing.
No kidding. But if you're in a situation that you know is on a linear progression towards a lessening of your material circumstances, your only option is to try to destroy that system.
Fair enough, yeah.
No, I would agree with that.
By the way, we got about 9 minutes left. So.
Okay.
But again, that gets to my idea that there is a clear way. They're not in a good... let's at
least say... It's also not democratic, because it's not responding to them.
I think one of the underlying problems of the whole thing here, too, is that humans crave authority. And that's why a lot of even democratic systems tend towards authoritarianism, because people... I mean, like, people like us, we don't probably crave it as much as most people, right? Like, there's free thinkers that don't want authority, but a lot of people can't function without authority. They legitimately don't want, like, there are people who would hate to, my wife would hate to work at a Democratic co-op. If you asked her to vote all the time, she'd just be like, no, I don't care.
That's a really good point. And I think that's made particularly bad because, getting back to education and all that, I think we have a society in place meant to encourage that and to facilitate that because of how much of our interactions are within an authoritarian context.
It's like what we were talking about last night with how authoritarian education is, where like if there's a teacher up there that's saying a thing and somebody's like, hey, I'm not sure that thing's right, they're like, well, fuck you, I'm the teacher. I know.
See,
like even outside, like my wife was mostly educated outside of the education system, so that doesn't even necessarily...
Was she in a fundamentalist community too?
Yes, we were up homeschooled originally, but...
Same with my girlfriend.
It's
It's dark.
A bunch of special.
I'm sorry, by the way.
Yeah, and well, I mean it's just like moving the authoritarian structure to home, though, right?
You have to think about personality. Like, let's go back to like the Big Five and the way that just individual personality differences have, right? You have differences on the openness dimension.
Yeah.
People that are really high in openness don't want authoritarian structures. People really low in openness do.
That's a good point.
You know?
But I do think there's an environmental factor there.
Yes.
Whereas, if you have whether you are raised in a fundamentalist community or you go to an authoritarian school system, that's going to create, a predisposition in the population towards those traits. Whereas, if you have, strong, open, democratic institutions and education system and all that, it's going to facilitate it more leaning in the other direction.
I just think that because every time we've tried that, they lean towards authoritarian, that we're not addressing the fact that there is an implicit desire in humanity.
I do think
to
there is.
Yeah.
I think you're right as well. And that's definitely something that we should, acknowledge.
And that's why.
So we have to acknowledge it to stop it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
And I think even within this model, there's still some of that. Because you're still electing leaders, At least they're accountable to you. But that's different than, the workers are getting together around a round table to vote on each decision every day, They're going, okay, we like what you're saying, give it a shot. And if we don't like what happens, we'll put someone else there. So don't fuck up.
It'd be interesting, too, to get into the the power checks with that, because the president, that's the
Right.
basic idea of what we have now, is that we elect somebody, but we've gotten to the point
Yeah.
where the system's so cohesive that we can't really do anything when somebody shitty gets elected.
I haven't come to some firm decisions on that in terms of how I feel about checks within the system. Because what if the person you've elected management literally tries to infringe on the rights of democratic?
Yeah.
So I guess you just have to make it so the management just doesn't, kind of like a constitutional system where okay, you can't take our democratic rights within the system, even if you're exercising your power to do a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah. There's lots of tiny Americas everywhere.
Yeah. Well, I like the idea of the diversity of them,
I'm
too.
okay with that, really.
Because it makes sense, because we do have a big problem with just the population growth. The system worked better when there were way less people, and there were more local, local governments were tighter and everything. The idea that states' rights and that government was more local in that sense,
for sure,
too.
yeah.
Now it's just 330 million people, let's go.
Booyah.
And to be honest, you also get, we can think of it even graphically, because I think it's a really cool way, but it's if you just if you have a bunch of huge ass circles, let's say all of the mainland of the United States had 6 circles of kind of political orientation, and it's you have super democratic people on the west side and super conservative people on the right side. It's even if you try to get a middle color of white, that's basically all you get. You get that polarization where you have a lot of blue on this side, a lot of red on this side, and kind of a neutral here. Yeah. But if you separate those into smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller circles, you can get a better gradation and more interaction that way of maybe there's more, it can become more dynamic, I guess, is that idea. There's smaller data points.
Also, I would also like to point out that there's a lot of uniformity in terms of the way our business is structured in the current economy. People go into management and they reference kind of the idea of how it's done, which is kind of well hammered out now. I would be so excited to see the kinds of experimentation and diversification of business structures. If you're giving workers in each business,
they do have a lot. You can go into different models and stuff with that.
Yeah.
There are different management philosophies. There's definitely a more. So we're actually kind of in the middle of trying to transition from a more old school philosophy to a new school, and
good.
Yeah, if you go to a lot of companies that have been around for longer, that are they're set in their ways. Not Google. Google's got the newer philosophy of a more democratic system. It's less pyramid shaped. There's a lot flatter based. People aren't in such clearly defined roles, as to where the more tight hierarchy is considered the old school management
definitely
style.
So it's getting better.
Yeah, most people if you go to business school will advocate moving away from that. That's sort of seen as the old school business farts are still trying to keep that away around.
And this is definitely part of my own hopes and idealism, but I would hope to see manifesting kind of a transition from capitalism to democratic businesses taking place slowly, kind of like capitalism emerging from feudalism. You know, because I'm studying that a lot right now. Is like the whole Enlightenment and how slow and just varied that process was.
Right, yeah.
Until, you know, some of the kings got sold on it, and then they made it happen really quickly.
Yeah, that happens with like everything, just like Christianity
Yeah.
and the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah, exactly. Constantine and all that. Yeah.
It's kind of that idea. I forget what like the best example of it is, but like when it flips.
It's
Right.
pretty
Like-
funny because the most
Mass.
capitalist,
Yeah,
the tipping point.
Sure.
the most capitalist-friendly monarch in Enlightenment Europe was Louis. Was the French king. He had an advisor that was like really into capitalism and Adam Smith? Yeah, Adam Smith and all that. And so they start pushing all this stuff to like, you know, government stop, you know, setting the price of bread and all this different stuff. And it would lead to the kind of social pressures that would lead to the French Revolution, which ironically, I mean, the goal succeeded. Capitalism emerged out of the French Revolution and replaced the royalty with the, you know, the business class. So it was a trip. It's a trip.
That is a trip.
Lost his head.
We should talk more about the French Revolution and other times in history next time.
Oh yeah, I'm still got a lot to learn on that.
I like looking through that lens and trying.
I can talk with authority on ancient Greece. Everything else, there's lots to learn
For
still.
sure.
You guys should talk about especially like big transitional periods.
That's why I'm so interested in that right now. That's my the Industrial Revolution's another one that I'm starting to, but right now I'm focused on Enlightenment.
That's cool.
Excellent. That was good though. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming by, Chris. That was awesome.
Yeah, that's fun.
That was good. Good debates.
Yeah. Let's cut this shit out. So. There's your time.
Timing.
I mean, Benjamin Franklin was an alien.
Benjamin.
Pretty much made sure that
Yeah,
the
definitely
French
an alien.
Revolution
Benjamin. I love Benjamin Franklin.
Those are facts.